Welcome to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. It's the show geared toward keeping you up to speed with the latest auto news, event coverage, and expert industry insight. Now, here are your hosts, Matt Avery and John Kraman.
We're so glad you've joined us for another episode of On the Move. I'm Matt Avery, executive producer of The Transmission, and joining me today is John Kraman, lead TV commentator for Mecum Auctions on NBCSN.
Hey, Matt, we are here at Mecum Indy. We're actually at the Indiana State Fairgrounds. Could not be more excited to bring this show to everybody. Hopefully everybody will be able to pick up the vibe of what's going on here. What's your impression so far as we're well into this auction on how well it's been going in this pandemic era?
Well, like you said, we are certainly coming down the home stretch of what's been a very busy and an exciting week. It's been a very long road to get here, but what I've noticed is a tangible sense of excitement by our guests and our attendees who just really seem thrilled to be back at a Mecum event. Even with the modified safety protocols put in place, I couldn't help but see just tons of smiles behind the mask, and as people are spread out, it really looks like guests are just excited to be back at a Mecum event around these great classic cars and back in the auction arena. The whole week has been made even better by some pleasant summer weather here in Indianapolis. The sun's been out, so it's been a great environment to take in these great classic cars and to take in the auction. And I think it's a great way for us to kick off the rest of our calendar year as we start looking at events later this summer and even into the fall. Now, I know you were out and about doing TV coverage right in the middle of the action. What have you been seeing?
Here's what I've noticed more than anything else, Matt, and that is, first I want to give credit to Harold Gertis, that is Mecum's VP of Operations, for being the guy that just puts all this together. Keeping in mind there's about 300 people have to be brought in to work this auction, and we're all operating under a pretty strict safety guidelines. We're all getting temperature checks as we come in with a wristband. We're required to wear a mask anytime that we're actually indoors. There's hand sanitizer everywhere. There's as much touchless procedures in place. As an example, a buyer no longer has to sign a bid sheet. There's a lot of different protocols. There's no brochures or catalogs or anything out for people to take. There's plexiglass separating people everywhere. Even the way that the post-auction settlement is being done, it's all being done by remote control. So far, from my indication, everything is going just as smooth as it possibly could be. And after a 2-month delay, we're really gratified to be back in business, man.
And the fairgrounds work out so well for this, John, because there's really a lot of room to spread out so that, there's not people on top of each other. It's really a great environment.
Well, I'm glad that you pointed out, Matt, because here's the data on that. There's about 1 million square feet of available space that we have here. And part of the protocols that we made to the fairgrounds when we wanted to do this auction under the new rules is we promised that we wouldn't use any more than half of that. And that would give us room to spread the cars out further for display, to spread the audience out further, bidders, sellers, spectators. Everybody's welcome at this auction, but people are separated, and honestly, not one single complaint. In fact, just the opposite. People are coming up to me and are just so happy and so gratified that Mecum has found a way to hold what is going to go down in history as one of the major collector car auctions in 2020 under these difficult times. Pulling it off, man.
Now, John, Mecum Auctions, first and foremost, is an auction house, and our guest is at the center of the action. Tell listeners who we've got coming on.
Oh, man, it's going to be so cool. Mark Dalzell is a name that a lot of folks associated with Mecum Auctions are going to recognize. He is the lead auctioneer for Mecum Auctions. Keep in mind, this exact auction, the Spring Classic, 33 years ago. It was a vision and brainchild of Dana Mecum, and Mark Dalzell was at that auction. He was the first auctioneer going all the way back to 1988. So Mark's going to take time from his duties up on the auction block today. He's going to come in with us on segment 2, and we're going to hear a lot about what it takes to be a world-class auctioneer.
And a big part of coming to a Mecum Auctions is experiencing the Dodge thrill rides. And coming on as our second guest, we have Michael Burris. He's going to give us kind of the full scoop of what it's like to be a driver behind the wheel of one of those high-performance Dodges screech around parking lots. So that's going to be really exciting. Before we get to all of of it, John, we have some big news in the auto world. After a long time, Ford has pulled the wraps off the Ford Bronco. John, what are your overall thoughts?
Well, it was quite an evening last night, Matt. I know you and I, we were apart, but we were both watching the reveal, and I frankly was captivated with the quality of the images and the information that they brought out without them having it be too lengthy. Before we get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the Bronco series now, first of all, let me say the retro theme and the design of the Bronco, from my perspective, right on target. What was your initial reaction of the appearance of the Bronco lineup?
I couldn't agree more with you, John. Ford hit the nail squarely on the head. They knocked the design out of the park, perfectly capturing the essence of the iconic first-gen body style while also making it thoroughly modern and set for today's age. So well done, Ford. And I think that this could kick off a resurgence of retro in vehicle design. Consumers are still drawn to that sense of nostalgia, especially in iconic nameplates. And with the stellar design that this Bronco has, I think there's a good chance that Ford could be leading that charge.
Well, absolutely spot on. And I think a little bit of that was revealed when both you and I were at SEMA last year. Ford did not have one of the new Broncos on display, but they had a dedicated vintage Bronco display in fact, it was all over the entire SEMA grounds in Las Vegas. They had over 100 vintage Broncos that they brought in. And I kind of thought Ford wouldn't be setting the stage and addressing the significance of the early Broncos, especially the Gen 1, which goes 1966 to 1977, unless they were going to kind of tie in that vintage vibe with these new ones, and they nailed it.
So, John, let's recap for listeners. What is Ford including in the Bronco rollout?
Well, the first thing that everybody has to remember is it looks like, very much like they did with the Mustang, it looks like Bronco will now be a brand name. It will be a large umbrella with several different models under that umbrella. And here's what we know so far for the debut in 2021. The Bronco itself, two distinct body styles, two-door and a four-door body style, and a third body style available as a four-door only called the Bronco Sport. Now, we do know that the Bronco Sport is a little bit of a light to a medium-duty off-roader based on the Ford Escape platform. But if you go up to the vehicle that's getting all the attention, the actual Bronco, not the Bronco Sport, that's the one that Ford has just gone crazy with a variety of option packages and off-road capability that looks like it's going to meet or even exceed the Jeep lineup.
Well, and a nice thing about that range of options is Ford is really giving shoppers their pick of how extreme they want their Bronco to be. It seems like from mild to wild, Ford has off-road shoppers covered.
Well, they are, but I think they're going to make you pay for it because they did announce a base price at around $38,000, which is very comparable to the Jeep Wrangler. No coincidence there. But they are saying a variety of different trim levels and suspension upgrades, interior upgrades, engine upgrades, etc., can push the price to actually over $60,000 with about a $5,000 stepping stone in between. We do know about the powertrain options. We speculated on that in the past couple of podcasts, and we do know the standard engine will be the 2.3-liter turbocharged inline-4 with the optional 2.7-liter twin turbo. Now, big news was manual transmission available, which it is a 7-speed. First time in a vehicle this class they've had a 7-speed, but that is only available on the base engine, the 2.3-liter engine. If you go with the 2.7 twin turbo at 310 horsepower, then you get a great transmission. It's a 10-speed automatic. And just a quick touch on the powertrain options for the Bronco Sport based on the Escape platform. It is also following the same powertrain options, a 1.5-liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder as a base engine with a 2-liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder turbo as optional.
Now, that Bronco Sport, to borrow your phrase, really seems to be an Escape with attitude, where it's a great entry-level vehicle into the Bronco lifestyle, but for people that want some of that extreme nature dialed back. So I think that'll be a big hit with shoppers.
Well, and I think you got to give a lot of credit to Subaru for really putting that on the map, the Outback in particular, such a popular vehicle. And I think we're going to see vehicles of that type, those sort of sport adventure vehicles, great for camping and different things like that, but not necessarily going out and rock crawling out in Utah. So it was a great reveal. It's a really interesting lineup. And tying in with that, our friends at FCA have made a very significant announcement of their own, and I'm sure it's intentional to take a little bit of the thunder away from the reveal of the Bronco. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, they figured out a way to pull just a little bit of wind out of Ford's sails, and they did it through a couple different ways. Let's first talk about the biggest news is that it looks like they are finally going to be putting a 392 V8 under the hood of a Wrangler.
Yeah, 392 Hemi looks like it is going to be going in the Wrangler. No price or availability yet, but they did pull the wraps off that. This has been a vehicle that we've heard about for a long time. The possibility of V8 power in a Jeep Wrangler has been a subject of discussion. In fact, on the Mecum auction block, we've seen conversions. There are conversions available to take a new or late model Jeep and put these engines in. But it looks like they're going to take their venerable 392 and have that as an available option. It puts out an incredible 450 horsepower. They're claiming a 0 to 60 time of 5 seconds. That will be unprecedented in an off-road vehicle. It might set the stage now for a resurgence of muscle-oriented off-road vehicles.
Now, far on the other end of the spectrum, Jeep also showed off an EV version of a Wrangler equipped with what they're calling 4xe.
Yeah, and that's interesting that they decided to do that, Matt, because we've seen in the past year or so a little bit of sort of downplaying from the traditional manufacturers on electric propulsion. 2-3 years ago, it was really big news. We thought within a couple 2-3 years we were going to be seeing a lot of it. During the Bronco reveal, no mention of electric and no mention of anything even hybrid. And other than what FCA has teased on the Jeep that you just mentioned, not much news out of the Mopar camp on electric power too. I'm sure it's going to happen. I think it's just been a little bit delayed.
Well, and irregardless of make, the electrification of off-road vehicles continues to be a very tricky thing to do, and the reasoning for that is range anxiety. Vehicles like the Bronco, like the Wrangler, they're designed, they're at home, off the pavement, off the grid, out into the great outdoors, being enjoyed by customers, and those same customers are not seriously going to consider any kind of all-electric version or any other vehicle unless it promises upwards of 400 or 500 miles of range. And right now, from a technology standpoint, we're just not there yet. In a conventional gas-powered vehicle, if you're off-road and you run out of fuel, it's easy enough to carry additional supplies with you on board, or you can have a buddy run into the nearest town and return with a can of gas. You dump it in and away you go. With an all-electric vehicle at this point, it's not that simple. So what Jeep is doing here is smart. The 4xe system, it's a plug-in hybrid, meaning that the vehicle will have a battery pack that's going to be working with the conventional gasoline engine. That will increase the overall efficiency of the vehicle. After a full charge, that battery pack will probably deliver several dozen miles of range. It's not a lot, but it's a good way to get this type of technology out onto the trails.
Mecum Auctions is proud to bring you On the Move with Matt Avery and John Kraman. For more on the world of collector cars, head over to mecum.com. Now let's get back to the show.
Hey everybody, we are at Mecum, Indianapolis. Man, 33 years of Dana Mecum's original Spring Classic, and I just went up to the auction block and I plucked the rock star of the auction, and that would be Mark Dalzell, the lead auctioneer for Mecum Auctions since this auction began 33 years ago. Mark, thanks so much for taking a little bit of time off the auction block. Come talk to Matt and I.
Hey, my pleasure.
How did you get started in the auction business, and specifically, how did you get tied up with Mecum Auctions?
Well, those are two great stories. I mean, they're great stories. My grandfather was a Ford dealer, and my dad, Chrysler Plymouth Dodge, and then my uncle also had a Chrysler Plymouth Dodge, and my dad had another dealership, and then, you know, I was around cars, so I liked cars. A guy opened up a little auto auction about 15 miles away in Iowa. And I was still in high school, and I started working over there, selling popcorn and driving cars, and just got into the auction business a little bit. Kind of decided, moved into the ring, working the ring as a bidder's assistant, and then figured out the guy making the money is the guy up on the auction block. So went to auction school, and that's kind of how I got in the auction business.
And then how did you get hooked up with Dana Mecum and Mecum Auctions?
Well, I was working at the time with a company out of California doing some classic cars, and then also working the Rockford Auto Auction, the Rockford area where Dana's from.
Dealer auctions.
Right, and knew Dana's dad, and heard that he was going to have a collector car auction. So I called him up, said, "Hey, Dana, I'd love to have a job." And he said, "Well, I haven't decided on the crew yet. I'm either going to hire the crew from California or the local crew from the Rockford Auto Auction." Well, I called him back up. He said, "Well, as far as I know, Mark, you're the only one that's got a job because the people in California want to use you and the guys from the Rockford Auto Auction want to use you." So he ended up combining the crew, and yeah, that was the first auction.
Mark, talk a little bit about the auction process. How exactly does it happen? And as the guy up front in the spotlight, what are you looking for? What's going through your mind?
Well, you're trying to control the crowd, get them to listen to you. If you're up there and you look and you see everybody just turning to their neighbor and talking, you need to stop, maybe tell a joke or slam your gavel a few times or do whatever to get their attention. Then once you got their attention, then you can work the crowd and work the bidding. And excitement's a lot of it. We have a very exciting crew. I mean, that's the difference between Mecum and most other auction companies.
It's interesting. You mentioned most other auction companies want to make it clear that you guys, other than Mecum Auctions, you and a lot of your crew will work the dealer auctions, the dealer-only auctions throughout the week. How much priority does your crew put on Mecum Auctions, and do you have a lot of people that want to get involved with Mecum?
Well, obviously, yeah, my phone rings since I manage the crew and I hire all the crew. I get a lot of resumes and a lot of telephone calls. And these guys love Mecum. I mean, they get to travel. We go to great places, and have a lot of fun, meet a lot of great people, and get to sell a lot of unbelievable cars.
How many crew members will you have at a Mecum auction, and specifically this auction here at Indianapolis, one of the big ones?
This auction, I've got, I think, 28 bidders assistants. There's 4 auctioneers and 3 of the seller's representatives, and then of course all the floor clerks and the upper clerks and the internet and then the phone bank, and there's over 50 involved in just the auction arena.
How do you, in the morning before the auction starts, how do you get everybody ready and charged up and briefed on what's going to be happening that day?
I would just have a morning meeting every time and go over the amount of cars, and if we have any special collections or any highlights, we give them break schedule and where they're scheduled to rotate. The crew, in Mecum, we started this years ago. You work on the floor, you work 1 hour, and then you get a 30-minute break. And then you work 1 hour and 30 minutes and rotate through all day long. If you only have that 1 hour, you know that within an hour you can give 100%, and you're going to have a 30-minute break. Back when I started, we didn't take any breaks. We were in there, and if you remember the old days, Johnny,
I do.
We'd be out there at 11 o'clock at night,
or later.
And you just kill her. But my idea was let's keep everybody just fresh. I mean, it's just like a football team. You pull somebody out, he runs a couple plays, you pull him out, put somebody else in, get him freshened up, and set him back out there.
Mark, talk a little bit about, on average, how many cars are crossing the block on an average day at a Mecum auction?
An average day, normally around 300. Somewhere around 300. We'll have some shorter days and longer. I'm trying to think what we have on Friday here, but probably closer to 400. And, that's a big day.
Do you try to manage a certain amount of cars per hour, or do you just let the auction flow based on its own daily dynamic? Or is it a combination of the two?
It is a combination of the two, yeah. I mean, sometimes you want to push if you got a big day. You don't want to be here at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. So, yeah, we try to average. Our average is probably somewhere between, on a lower end, 35 to 40. When we get in the high-end cars, we can get down to 10, 12, 15 an hour.
Mark, in your many years of working with Mecum Auctions, I know you've seen a lot of neat vehicles. I'm sure you've experienced a lot of highlights. What are some of the ones that stand out to you?
Like I said, my father was a Chrysler, Plymouth, Dodge, and I just love Mopars. I mean, I love them to death. I had a world record car the one time, the Daytona Coupe we sold in Monterey, and it was at the time a world record car. It's been I've knocked down since then, but that's one of my highlights, and one of my biggest highlights is the Jerry Lee Lewis motorcycle.
Oh,
do you remember that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that was just a phenomenal.
We wheeled a piano up on the auction block, and the killer banged out great balls of fire right up there on the middle of the stage, right in front of the your auction pedestal. That was one of the top moments in my mind as well.
It was like reserve off, and I said, "Take it, Jerry."
Yeah,
and
perfect.
And it was hilarious because the network TV, I was up there with my mic off, lip syncing and dancing, and the network TV zoomed in on me up there. It was hilarious. You go to YouTube, and I tell people, hey, you got to watch this. It's hilarious.
With as many hours as Mecum Auction is on television, you're featured pretty prominently in your important role. Do you understand, do you even acknowledge the fact that there's a really good chance that you're going to be going out to hundreds of thousands of people, or do you keep that separate and stay focused on what you're doing?
Well, when we first started the TV, you're thinking, well, what do I do? How do I do this right? And you're doing a lot of things that you normally don't do. You're acting. But then today, I don't even know whether TV's on or not. I mean, I'm thinking about selling cars. I forgot about the TV show.
How many gavels does your team go through in the course of a day? Because you pound on them, so.
Yeah, well, it can be dangerous too, because when you whack them, sometimes they'll fly out in the crowd. But yeah, we keep a pretty good supply here with the social distancing and the Corona and everything. We've all got our own now, and you can wipe them down after everything. But yeah, normally one will last 2 or 3 auctions, unless Matt Morvick gets in a terror and just starts whacking them. But he's the one who breaks most of them.
Speaking about Matt Moravec, he's one of the young top auctioneers. Do you have anything in place to get a new generation, some of these younger auctioneers up to speed? And we'll use Matt maybe as an example.
Yeah, we've got a plan. We've got a lot of good auctioneers on the floor. I mean, the majority of the bidders' assistants are auctioneers.
Okay.
And we've been training them and giving them some time, auction block time. Yesterday at the Road Art, they sold the whole sale. We've got one of them up there today in the rotation. Have another one at the rotation tomorrow. And just getting them trained. And I sit in the crowd and listen and judge and I've got a plan.
Do you give them much critique?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
enough said.
Right. Any boss is, any boss, if they do something I don't like, I'm like, here it is. So,
Mark, you've been in the business for a long time. Talk a little bit about what is it about the live event experience that keeps people coming back to want to engage in it?
Well, I don't know how to explain that at all, but it's like a big family with a lot of us. I mean, some of the people, you see him at every auction, and all of a sudden you think, well, I haven't seen him for a while. But it's, and there's a lot of excitement. And a lot of the people have been watching the TV show, and you don't know how many of them come up to you. And John, you probably have the same thing. I've been watching this and watching it. And then my wife bought me this trip for my birthday, or we planned this, 6, and then you get them to come once. Next thing you know, 3 months later, they're back.
Well, Mark, thanks for taking some time off the auction block. We know you have to get back out there. We're right in the middle of an auction. Thanks so much for coming on the show and giving us a little bit of insight. Much appreciated.
Oh, my pleasure, JK.
Don't adjust that dial. On the Move, we'll be right back. Our program is proudly presented by Mecum Auctions, the world's largest collector car auctions. Now back to Matt and John.
John, no trip to a Mecum auction is complete without a stop at a Dodge Thrill Ride. What is a Dodge Thrill Ride? Dodge brings a fleet of their high-performance vehicles, and it's free to people that are here at the auction. It's a closed course, and guests can ride along with a professional driver and see the best of Dodge in action. It's a very cool thing. To find out more, we've got Michael Burris in the studio. Michael's one of the professional drivers that gets to be behind the wheel. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank thank you for having me.
So, Michael, tell me, what's your background? How did you get into driving, and how did you get into high-performance cars?
I've been very lucky all my life. I mean, I've raced go-karts, raced sprint cars for a lot of years, wing and non-wing. Like all of us, went down south, to run some stock cars. Won a driver's search, went to Australia. I've done a little road racing up in Canada, and I've been doing these kind of programs for about the last 14 years.
As cool as it is to be behind the wheel of these cars, the course is short, only a quarter mile. Tell us, what is the hardware? What are the actual cars that you're using? I see out there Challengers and Chargers. Give us the details.
Yeah, actually, we bring Challengers and Chargers to the events. The thing everybody needs to know, they all have the Hellcat engine in them. So everything we bring is a Hellcat. Chargers, Challengers, wide-body Challengers also that we bring to the event. And we always get the question, and yes, we always run the red key. So the Chargers are 707 horse. The Challengers now are 717. Motor's the same. The only difference is when they change the hood to that dual snorkel hood, it's shoving a little bit more air into the car, gives it 10 more horsepower. But other than that, it's the same car. A little bit longer wheelbase on the Charger, but yeah, that's what we bring to every event.
All right, next question about the hardware. What about maintenance on these cars? You're doing a lot of, basically all day long you've got these cars out there ripping around. What's the situation with brakes and tires and being able to get gas in these cars?
Well, the first thing I need to establish is tire wear is not really my strong suit. So actually, on a normal day, each one of us, we'll go through a set of rear tires every 2 hours. So every 2 hours, so normally we'll go through 4 sets of rears and a set of fronts. Every day when we're out there running. Brakes, actually, you don't use as much brake as you would think because you really drive the car, as much with the throttle as you do with the steering wheel, so not as much brake because, when you're sideways going into a corner, that actually scrubs off speed also. So, not as much on the brakes, but the cars stay maintenance all the time. And the thing that people need to realize is that we use the same 6 cars all year, and these things don't miss a beat. So they go with us, they travel around with us all season, and they never miss a beat. Same 6 cars.
Michael, one of the interesting things is that the experience isn't the same. Your team mixes up the tracks at each of the different Mecum locations. Talk a little bit about how you guys go about designing the courses.
That's very interesting because, yeah, really, it's a different ride everywhere we go. And that's actually really not predetermined by us. That is predetermined by when we get there, what kind of space we're given. Like when we were in Kissimmee, we're out there, we were in a parking lot, so we were going around light poles and fire hydrants and parking curbs and things of that nature. So sometimes, like here at Indy, we go in and there's a lot of buildings and things and curbs that we go around. Some places we go, it's a wide open parking lot and we can do whatever we want. Sometimes they have us on a road course, so and we're drifting the road course. So some are shorter, some are longer, and really just depends upon when we get there, the amount of space and where they actually want us to set up. And then what we do at that point is we look at that and we say, okay, what is the best track we can set up for the space that we've got?
Give us a snapshot of the ride-along experience from the time that you first meet that person until the time that you say goodbye to them.
Absolutely. So when we pull up, we're going to get somebody in the car with us. They're going to get, obviously, we all introduce ourselves and, such to them. See a lot of people, but normally ask them if they've been with us before, and whatnot, and kind of give them an idea of what they're going to go through. So we always, in the cars now, as opposed to just giving them a ride, we also try and give them some information about the car. Like all these they come standard with terrific performance screens that come on the car that you can switch it to. So we like to keep it on the dyno screen. And the reason we like to do that is because everybody likes horsepower and torque and everything. And what that will do is that shows horsepower, torque, and RPM numbers, and we show it for their run. And when we come back in, we can just hit the button and freeze it so that they can see it, so they can actually see exactly what we did out there. And then at the end of the ride, a lot of people like to video and stuff, or they have people videoing or taking pictures, and we always encourage them that if they have any pictures, videos, anything like that, to tag it with hashtag Dodge Thrill Rides. That way everybody can see them and check them out. And if they go hashtag Dodge Thrill Rides, hashtag Mecum, even better.
Michael, one of the things you mentioned earlier that's pretty fascinating is that you find a lot of attendees are surprised that these are vehicles available in the showroom. These aren't modified, or there's no special prep done to these cars to get them to perform like that.
That's probably the biggest surprise to everybody. That's another thing, like when we come to the end of the ride, that's one of the things that we all make sure and let everybody know. We say, hey, this is what you buy. And because they all think that these are some specially prepared drift cars or whatever. No, this is exactly what you buy off of the showroom floor. And that's really surprising to everybody with the way that the cars perform. But the greatest thing about that is, and I tell them, I said, the cars can do that, but they are so comfortable to drive. The cars will perform like this, but then you can drive them to dinner and get over 20 miles a gallon.
Have you ever had anybody that you're aware of get exposed to the car, the performance from what you've done, and then actually end up buying either a Charger or a Challenger?
It's funny that you asked that. We were in Vegas last year, and I had a gentleman get in my car. I was in a Charger, a Destroyer gray one actually, and he got in and he just happened to say, he goes, I'm getting ready to buy a new car. He goes, I'm either going to buy a Corvette or a Hellcat, and he goes, I like the Chargers, that's why I wanted to drive this. And I said, that's great. And he just mentioned that the dealer down the road had a Destroyer gray one like this, and I said, well, if you buy that car, I said, this is what you're buying. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, this is completely stock. And he goes, really? And I said, yeah. So we went out and I gave him the ride, and we came back in and, obviously went over the performance screens and everything and all of our hashtag Dodge Thrill rides. And he goes, I'm going to get the car right now. And literally an hour and a half later, he sent us a picture. He bought the car. He got out of my car and he went down and he bought the car. I'm not exactly sure how all that works, but I think there's a commission out there for me somewhere. I'm not sure about that.
This is such a great program. This is a win-win for both Mecum and, of course, for Dodge to be able to expose the cars. And it's really great for the attendees as well, because it's easy to sign up. You get a free T-shirt, and you get put in a drawing for a $75,000 credit towards the purchase, if you're the winner, of course, towards the purchase of any FCA product. So it's free to do. It's at many of the Mecum auctions, and we hope that for a long time that we continue this relationship. I think the customer base, and I'd like to get your comment on this, they're performance oriented. That's, we do everything, exotics and Corvettes, but muscle cars are really sort of the core of what Mecum and auctions is all about. And Dodge right now in the OEM world, they're leading the charge with their products, and you're showcasing it to the customers.
That's absolutely correct. And the people that get in the cars with us, and we get a lot of people that come back through because people love coming to the auctions, right? So we get a lot of people that come in and they're like, hey, I rode with you a year ago and I couldn't afford a Hellcat, but I bought a 6-cylinder Charger and I love it. Or I bought a Scat Pack, and I love it. And the greatest thing about that is my opinion might be a little biased, but Dodge builds the baddest cars on the planet, and we get the opportunity to come with Mecum, who sells more, collector cars and muscle cars, than anybody on the planet. So to me, that's a pretty good marriage.
I got to ask you, man, you've had a lot of racing experience. Really impressed that you were a sprint car driver. You guys stand on it and usually don't even back off. But shifting gears and going a little bit, when it comes to vintage cars, collector cars, what do you have an interest in personally?
My interest has always been, I'm a muscle car guy. So, pretty much anything in the muscle car era. The great thing now is, because I like everything like from late 60s, early 70s is kind of that era that I was in. But now with everything that's going on, because we always say, hey, that was the good old days. To me, now's the good old days.
You've been listening to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. For more information, visit Mecum.com. And join us again next time as we take you inside the world of muscle and collector cars and more.